Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's teaching. I want to dive into something that is useful and beneficial and impactful and empowering for every single one of us. And I think it's a really underrated and not discussed enough topic. And so today I want to speak about the power of integration and the importance of integration and how do we even integrate. So with the video before, if you haven't watched it, please check it out or the episode before, if you haven't watched or listened to it, please check it out. I spoke about how do you know if you are having an ego death and you are experiencing an ego death, and what's actually happening in the ego death in your system, in your body-mind system, and how to navigate it in a powerful, empowered, conscious way. And today's episode is the next step from that, and that is how do you then integrate those shifts so that it becomes something that is not just information that you know, and it's not just a memory of an experience that you had once, but it becomes deeply integrated into your whole being, and it becomes who you are. It actually becomes the embodiment of who you are being. And being and understanding are not the same things. And so this is for those of you that have done so much work on yourself. You know all the things. You literally could sit with me right now and tell me every bit that you have understood about why your patterns are the way they are, why you feel the way you do, why you attract things the way that you do. You know that this happened in your childhood, and you know that it was because this happened and that happened, or this didn't happen. You know a lot. In fact, we're at a time now where the consumption of information, particularly in the world of transformation and self-development, is saturated. And what I started to see in our programs, in particular our Listening to Life program, which is our entry-level, beginning-level 4-day intensive, that we were starting to get almost 99% of the group being able to tell me everything, every bit of information that was the right information about why they are the way they are, and why they feel the way they feel, and what happened in their past. And they were using all the right words. In fact, the information was accurate. And yet that information didn't seem to be sufficient to create deep, fundamental change in who they are being, in how they experience their world, and how their world shows up for them, unfolds for them. And so something is missing. We have so much insight and information, but without integration, it never becomes your life. So if you have noticed that you have been having breakthroughs, that you have been doing work, maybe you have been in therapy and group sessions, and you know everything you need to know about trauma, and you really do, you have all the insights. And yet, your 3D life doesn't seem to be fundamentally changing. You still find yourself experiencing intimacy in the same way. You still find yourself having similar relationships, just slightly different details. You still experience improvements in your life, but it still seems to have a magnetic pull to return to a particular way of suffering and struggle and difficulty of who you experience yourself and how your world is for you. So if you are finding yourself in that place, then this video is so important for you. And I want you to know you're not doing anything wrong. It's just a blind spot. That insight does not equal integration. And so I want to speak about what actually is integration. So the points that I'm going to cover in today's video is what integration actually is. What does it really mean and look like beyond it being a buzzword? What's actually taking place in your consciousness and the cellular structure of your system and your nervous system and the perception that you have of your sense of self, what's actually taking place that is creating an upgrade, a maturing of your sense of self and your relationship to self that then shifts the filter that your world appears through. And so you start to experience a different possibility for your world. Which of course is the point, right? Because we all are doing this work because we want to be able to change our worlds and have power over the unfolding of our realities. And I want to speak about some practices and contexts from which we can begin to hold our integration that will allow it to be deep and embodied and be able to materialize into actual reality, real change, not just out there, but in here, and more than just your feelings, more than just your information about yourself and your awareness about yourself, but you quite literally experience yourself as a different being, and then you start living from that place. I also want to speak about why integration is the most overlooked piece of the transformational process, in my view, and also how much time should integration usually take. Not as a rule, but just to be able to give you a sense that it is not an overnight thing, and nor should it be. And if it is, and that's what you're searching for, then you're robbing yourself from the profoundness of how much change you have the power to allow to take place inside your own self and your relationship to sense of self, and to the reality that you get to create and live and have. So those are the points that I'm going to cover today. And I hope that they are really helpful for you. So let's begin. Okay, so the first point that I want to cover is what integration really means. What actually is it to integrate? And a direct translation of the word or meaning of the word is to let in, to quite literally take in deeply. And so if we're referencing going through an identity death or an outgrowing of another layer of your survival identity and your identification to a particular survival way of knowing yourself, then what is it that you are actually being invited to take in the integration process? Because, nowadays, most of us can show up on a Friday night and have profound awakening, expansive experiences. We can go to the Amazon and take psychedelics and really have profound experiences. We can go down the road to a holotropic breathwork session and have a profound experience. We can do it even in the workshops and the programs that I lead. You can have profound experiences. In fact, experiencing moments of enlightenment are not rare or new these days, which in a way is a good thing. But those experiences are not the same as integrating what you learn from those experiences so it becomes who you are in how you live your everyday life and how your actual life unfolds. It's not the same thing. And I think the first thing to point out is a lot of people are getting confused between the high, expansive, profound awakening experience with that being what's going to change your life. No, that's just the beginning of what you then need to take in. The hard work is taking it in so that it becomes who you are, and who you are is what creates your life. So what is it that we're actually taking in? Or what is the invitation to what we could possibly take in? Well, let's break it down. What's actually happening when we go through big, profound shifts in how we see ourselves and how we know ourselves and how we experience our human experience? So speaking about the ego death, when your entire perception of how you have seen yourself and known yourself, and therefore how you have seen who you've been being in your life and why your life is the way it is, and how that unlocks, that shift, that loosening of the bolts of the attachment to the identity, to the ego, starts to allow what has been frozen and stuck in time, quite literally from the original memory, the original experience, frozen in time in the nervous system, that starts to come up. So we start to experience what we have been suppressing. So there, you can hear there's an awful lot that's taking place that is an opportunity to take in. And let's break it down. Firstly, I said in the video before, learn as much as you can possibly learn out of every single ego death that you go through, every single profound shift that you go through. Don't just have the experience, which is similar and equivalent to just getting high. Learn as much as you can learn out of the profound experience. Why? Because when you start to look deeply at how this powerlessness that's coming up for you makes sense to why you have chosen the partners you have chosen. The very moment that you have that experience of seeing and consciousness, not just the information, but you actually experience yourself being yourself and why you lived the way you have been. You experience what's been running you at a root level, and that shifts the depth from which you're seeing yourself. It shifts how you see yourself, and it matures and shifts your entire relationship to self. And so that in itself is already a maturing process. Your consciousness is shifting. Your awareness is shifting. Can you see it and feel the pain around it? Maybe there's sadness. Wow, all these years, that's why I haven't been writing my book. Or all these years, that's why I never paint anymore. All these years, that's why I've chosen partners that hurt me. Oh, allowing yourself to feel the depth of that sadness and compassion, and maybe anger that needs to be felt. What comes out of those shifts in insight will likely come with more emotions and more awareness and consciousness. And if you're letting yourself actually feel with responsibility, I'm going to feel this. And when you're letting yourself really see and learn without blaming, but actually learning, that's why I was the way I was. That's why I've chosen those choices. That's why I get triggered the way I do. Oh, I see it. But you're not just seeing it as information. You're feeling yourself see it. You're feeling yourself in who you've been being. And that gives you an opportunity to shift experientially your whole relationship to self. Now, that's just one piece that could be an invitation to what we can take in. And that can be a lot. Like when I came out of the end of my marriage, how easy it would have been just for me to blame him. He's like this, and he never met my needs this way, and he was so like this, and he never did this. I could easily have just stayed there. But I knew that I would be robbing myself of the opportunity of having a profound growth spurt from the end of that marriage, from the breakdown of that piece of my life, that could allow me the possibility of having a new kind of relationship, a new relationship with intimacy, a whole new possibility for myself and my world. So I wasn't going to just stay there and blame him. I decided to learn everything I could possibly learn about myself, and not just to see it as information, but to let myself experience it. I had to really see, why would I stay for 13 years if he didn't meet my needs? Wow, how little worth I have felt about myself. And I didn't even know it. It was hidden and a blind spot. And then letting myself feel the heartbreak and the grief and the sadness for my own self, that I thought so little of myself that that's what I chose for myself, predominantly unconsciously, but that's what I chose for myself. Why did I even need someone that behaved that way? Oh my goodness, it was exactly how I experienced myself with my mother. Oh, so I wouldn't even know who I am if I didn't always have that struggle. You can go back and watch the first 10 episodes of the podcast episodes that are here, or listen to them, and that will teach you all about those repeating patterns. And every single time I saw another layer of why I had been being the way I am, I had something to experience about it. It was not just information. I had to feel. I had to be responsible for how my past had been coloring my present and how unconscious it had been. And every single time that I saw more deeply, and I was able to let myself experience all the experience that came with that, and to do that with compassion, something was upgrading in my system. My awareness and my consciousness was upgrading about myself, about what's been running me, about blind spots that I didn't even know, that I didn't even know, that I didn't even know. Every single time I let myself feel what I had been using all my energy to block and armor and protect, not only did it feel healing, but it quite literally was shifting the cellular structure of my system. I was no longer having to use my energy and my body to suppress and manage and tense and hold this tension that I didn't even know that I was using to keep all that emotion down. And so letting myself feel it deeply, it quite literally was opening my heart more. And my system was shifting. My frequency was shifting. Now, this doesn't happen overnight. This happened over months and months and months. And so the insight is the first step. But then once you see, can you let it in? Letting yourself feel it, letting yourself experience it, letting yourself be with the shift that's taking place on a body-mind level. Now, so what actually is upgrading? Well, our entire identity is given by the memory in the memory bank. Everything in our memory bank, in our mind, gives us the shaping of how we know ourselves and our sense of self. And then everything in our past is frozen in time in the nervous system. And so essentially, who we think we are is really repeated mechanical experiences of the nervous system given by the past and a mental image shaped by the past, until we start to see more and more the blind spots that the past has been keeping us in. So because the mind is led by survival, and the body and the mind cannot be separated, you cannot separate the mind from the nervous system, the brain from the nervous system. What your brain mind recognizes as normal and balanced may be the traumatized state of anxiety that you were just normally in your childhood. So whatever is in the memory bank shaping who we think we are, that will be the balance point. So when we go through these massive ego deaths and we go through these big shifts of transformation, the experience itself is powerful. It kind of breaks us out of a trance. But the integration process, that's when we have to over and over and over and over again experience our brain mind pull us back into the familiar homeostasis balance point. And each time it does, shifting our whole relationship to it so that we're less and less attached to it. Now, that sounds easier said than done. It's not easy, but it's extremely powerful. And what I mean by that, I'll give an example. My ex-husband and I would have the same fight, the same trigger point. I would feel my needs not being met. I would speak about it. He would feel trapped and judged. Then I would feel betrayed and abandoned. And then he would feel my disappointment. And it just would go round and round, which of course was exactly my pattern with my mother and his pattern with his mother. After doing some deep work on ourselves as a couple, we stopped that fight. And what was so wild to me was how uncomfortable it was for me when there was no longer any fighting. I felt more uncomfortable with the joy and the peacefulness than I did with the fighting. Why? Because I grew up in a household where my parents fought a lot. And then I got into a marriage where we fought a lot. In fact, it was the only way that my body-mind knew who I was. Quite literally. Even when things were peaceful, my mind would try to pull me back in creating problems. I would then start to even experience the disappointment and the frustration, self-generated, even if nothing was happening. The magnetic pull to return back to the same homeostasis balance point. Now, integration is when we let in everything we've learned from our ego death, which means more than just information. We're now ready to let it in and change how we show up. And it begins with ourselves first. So when we're being pulled back to the homeostasis balance point, which strangely feels comforting, even though it's painful, like the anxiety that you struggle with 24/7, if you woke up tomorrow and it was gone forever, you would have an identity crisis, or the panic about money, or never feeling like there's enough, or feeling like you always are something bad's gonna happen. That is the homeostasis balance point. Even though you don't like it, would you even know who you are without it? So the integration process is becoming conscious that that's taking place and learning from our ego death shift, so that when that homeostasis and that magnet pulls us back in, we are more conscious of it this time, and we don't just get pulled in and end up doing and being the old way that we've always been. When I had that with my husband and I found myself desperately wanting to pick a fight, already pissed off with him And he hadn't done anything. I had enough consciousness over what my system was doing. Wow, look at how my nervous system is quite literally self-generating the disappointment and the frustration and the anger and the irritation. He's not doing it. It's being self-generated. And my mind is attaching it to him. Because why? Because it is familiar and it is comfortable, and I know myself here. So part of my integration was to quite literally let that flooding move through my body. But this time, because I had learned something from my shift, I had learned that that is part of what I have had frozen in my system from childhood. And I let myself experience it, but I don't act out. This time, I can be with it a little bit more freely because I am conscious and aware of what's taking place. I did not act out. I didn't say anything. And eventually it passed. And then it happened again a week later. And this time I was able to be with it a little bit more loosely. And then it passed. And what you start to notice is that the homeostasis balance point starts to shift. What used to be the balance point, which was the trauma and the chaos and the drama, starts to become the peace, the calm, you as a centered being. And that starts to change who you're actually being, how you feel yourself, how you show up as yourself. You may not even recognize yourself. And of course, that is when you start changing how you act and changing what you do. And that's what changes your life. So the last point is what is a normal time frame for integration? Now, what I see a lot is people coming back from workshops and the Amazon and these big experiences thinking that that's it. Their life has changed. No. It can take months. It can take a year. It can take years. So strap yourself in, because this is the real part. The real part is where you get to actually be responsible for the shift you've had and integrate it, let it in so that it shifts and changes how you show up, so that when you are in your next relationship, you are quite literally showing up and resonating as a different being. And surprise, surprise, your life and reality starts to unfold differently too. So when people come out of our retreats, they tell me it can take a year to integrate after 7-day retreat. When I came out of Peru and I went to work with Noya Rao, I'm still integrating. This was in December. And it's not easy. It's not easy. Like, it means that I actually have to keep facing more and more of the lessons that I had in those ceremonies, experience them, and then change the actual way that I'm being in my life, which changes my life. So it's quite literally like taking Tetris and reorganizing how your life unfolds, but reorganizing who you're being first. The last thing I want to say is, when we go through these upgrades, when you are willing to integrate, it quite literally upgrades our frequency. And when we're resonating at a higher frequency, our reality responds to that communication. And that's when we start to see what some people may call miracles. Suddenly, my mother started speaking to me in a way that was much more loving, and I'd never heard her like that before. Suddenly, I attracted this partner that I've never had anybody that was so kind to me before. I suddenly, money started to flow in my life, because who we're being gives us the emergence of the 3D world that we get. So that is the power and the importance of integration. Don't rob yourself of this part of the process. And so now we're moving on to the next part. How do you take integration to create actual 3D results? When you want to be able to take this upgraded version of yourself, how do we then transmute that into action and behavior and materializing new results in our world? So that's going to be the next video, the next episode. Please head over to that. I will see you there. Thanks so much.